Okay, Burning Issy, Melvin, Burgess, Chapter 4. First time Jeanette came to fetch us, Nat was in and we couldn't get away. She came again at twilight and I was out there to see a sick child. I said I'd come too, and she threw me a pained, wistful look. I knew she'd rather I stay behind, but I wasn't backing out, not now. I've been called a devil's child so many times. I wanted to see what people thought I was. We ran inside for our capes and our hoods and followed her up the hill. Malkin Tower stood in the corner of a muddy pasture and the ridge of a hill. Behind was the great hulk of the Pendle Hill. In the other direction was the clear view across the Clone and Marsden to the northeast of the Irby. Beyond, right over the Yorkshire Dales, once it had been used as a lookout tower, but the years of wind and wet had taken the cladding off the sides. Excuse me. And even got the timbers beneath. Now a couple of great rotting beams pointed miserably to heaven above a green mound crouched low on the ground, where the witches had bent branches and heaped up to turf the roof. There were no windows. They had no wooden door, patched up and rotted, ill-fitting though it was. All around this time of year was a shallow bog of trodden mud and water that flowed in toward them. They built a low wall of earth and stones to keep the water from coming right into the earth floor of the hovel itself. Before long we could see flames flickering ahead. The witches had built a fire in the field outside their home. In half an hour we were near enough to see them, sitting crouched underneath the broken beams at some kind of work, the firelight. Jeanette led us round to one side of the low dry stone wall and told us to be quiet. There was a gusty, cold, flickering rain at us from all directions, beating the flames into angry shapes. The fire roared and heaved and flew flights and sparks across the fields. I could feel my hands sweating. I thought I'd seen that fire before. I began to pant with fear. It's just to keep you warm. It's a cold night, whispered Jeanette. She touched my cheek briefly and whispered, Go quickly. But I shook my head. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. Jeanette slipped to join her family. I couldn't stop shaking. Shh, hissed Gil. I realised I was gasping aloud. He pushed me down to the dirt and I lay there hugging the mud, listening to the roar of the fire, trying to calm myself. The fire had been recently soaked up with fresh wood, but it soon started as it settled down to a steady glow. I began to feel better and peeked through a crack in the wall to see what they were doing. Old Demdike was sitting on a stone in the mud as close as the fire as she could. She was covered with head to foot in rags, wrapped round her body, her head, so that a bony face showed. Her daughter, squinting Lizzie, sat to one side, also wrapped up like a parcel in rags, and by her side was Jeanette's elder sister, Alison. Demike's son James sat behind with Jeanette, his hands in his chin, watching them. Demdike, Lizzie and Alison held something on the ground with their hands, which they were pressing and moulding. As they worked, they spoke quietly to themselves. They never looked up, stopped their mumbling chant, and they were so still and composed that I might have thought they were their people at prayer if I had not known better. Apart from needing action between their knees, the only move was squinting Lizzie. Since her eyes were set so crookedly in her head, she had a habit when she looked closely at something of turning her head first from one eye to the other, then from one eye to the other. Now her head moved regularly from one side to the other, tick-tock, like a fierce, quick bird. Lizzie lifted her work up to see it better by the light. She was moulding a small figure. She turned it to and fro, shook her head from side to side, and scratched it as if face with a nail. She sighed, pulled her wraps closer, and inched nearer into the fire, as if she could somehow wriggle right into the embers without getting scorched. Demdike stared straight ahead into the fire, warming her blind face and keeping her work out of sight. Her lips moved ceaselessly, and it was clear that nothing existed in the world but the making of that small figure. Alison, on the contrary, seemed to be having difficulties. Jeanette had told me that Alison had been a witch for only a few years and was no good at it at all. She frowned and sighed, laboured heavily on the little model. Her mother Lizzie kept turning to glare at her. "Well, how is your work?" she asked at last, turning her face to the fire so she could see Alison sitting by her shoulder. "Good enough," replied the girl cautiously. "Well, you'll find out in a week or so," muttered her mother. "If you put your soul into the work, the devil will know you do as you ask." The Demdike, suddenly lifting up her face as she spoke, so that we could see the blank hollows of her eyes. "A witch works with her soul, not her fingers. If my hands were cut off, I could still turn a man into his own shadow." "Let me see," demanded Lizzie, who snatched up the figure her daughter was working and held it to the light, scowling. She was not pleased with what she saw. "Even when she works, she produces nothing," she hissed, and flung the little thing in the girl's face. "You're not fit to beg," she screamed. For a second I thought she would strike her. I closed my eyes, hid deeper in the shadow of the wall, but she just squatted back down and spat at the fire. "Give it to James," she snapped. "Those swine at the mill won't go and punish for your sake." Alison gave the work to James, who came and took her place by the fire while she vanished into the shadow behind out of harm's way. "Take some more wax and try for the baby," ordered Demdike. Excuse me. Alison got up and went into the house for more wax. She sat down close to the fire again and began warming it up in her hand to make it workable. "They're calling people's souls to come and live in those figures," whispered Gil excitedly. "They can harm the body by harming the models. I wish they'd speak louder. I'd give anything to hear the voices of the souls they're calling." "Why should they want to hurt Bloodwind's new baby?" I asked. "I seen the babies a few days ago when I went with Nat to buy nails. I begged to hold it, and it gurgled in my arms and peed down my shoulder, making everyone laugh. Surely your new baby could have done no witches no harm." Gil shrugged. "Baldwin wanted to see him hanged, and Demdike went there to beg the other day and whipped off this land. Now we'll see how well the devil does her work." Gil was getting impatient. He could see the spells being worked, but he couldn't hear them. And I think if he tried to creep over to the wall to get closer, he'd never have had the chance. A few minutes later, Demdike suddenly turned her head. Someone spoke. She hushed them with a hiss and wave of a hand, but she put down her work and stood up. Everything went still. I pressed my face into the mud. I knew at once she knew we were there. Don't ask me how. I just knew she knew. "Please, God, keep her away," I prayed, but I was too fearful to run. I hadn't learnt to trust my instincts, and I was frightened making a noise. I opened my eyes, peered through the gaps into the walls once more. Demdike was sniffing and turning her head this way and that like an animal, testing the air. She moved slowly in circles, sniffing, turning, sniffing, until she was directly facing the wall where we hid. "James, Lizzie," she called. She gestured to them. They ran to each of our sides over the wall. As soon as they were in position, Demdike hobbled straight toward us. "I smell strangers," she hissed. She crouched over us sick and moved so fast she might have been on her wheels, her blind eyes fixed on us as if she could see right through us to the stone wall. As she came, Lizzie and James closed in from either side. That second, Gilbreth ran for it, but as soon as he got to his feet, he showed up in firelight and James was onto him. I heard a thud, a shout as he hit the ground, a squeal of pain as James dragged him to his feet. I tried to slide under the shadow of the wall away from Lizzie, but the witch seemed to know exactly where I was. She pounced on me as if I were a rabbit, dragged me up by my hair. I fought back. I needed to break my grip, and she wouldn't have caught me had I not had the wind to ride. But a hand flung back, and I had a violent blow to my ear, knocking me, twisting me into the mud. My head was spinning, and my ear buzzing, and she dragged me up again, and she kicked me over the wall into the circle of the firelight where Demdike was waiting. End of chapter 4.